Welcome back to the deep dive. So we have to talk about the cover of The Economist this week. Usually, you get a chart, a building, maybe a portrait. Very dry.
Right.
Not this time. This time it's a snake. A coiled, striking snake. And its skin is, well, it's made of U.S. dollar bills. It's so visceral.
It's a really disturbing image. And the headline, "The Dangerous Dollar," it just captures this split-screen feeling we all have right now in February.
That's the perfect phrase for it, a split-screen feeling. Because if I just, look at my stock app, everything seems fantastic.
Unbelievable, right?
The S&P 500 is up 14%. AI is booming. It feels like a party. But then you look at the other screen, the bedrock of the whole system, and the floor is just falling out from under the dollar.
And that's the paradox we have to unpack today. Why is Wall Street accelerating while the dollar is, for all intents and purposes, crashing? I mean, it's lost 10% of its value against other major currencies since just January of last year.
For the world's reserve currency, that isn't a dip, that's a collapse.
No, it is.
And you see it in other places, too. Gold just hit $5,000 an ounce.
5,000.
I remember when people thought 2,000 was just, insane.
And we're going to get into that because the price of gold isn't about speculation anymore. It's really acting as a kind of global referendum on the U.S. government's stability.
Okay, so here's the plan for today. We're going to dig into why the dollar is falling apart, how tariffs and tax cuts are spooking everyone. Then we'll pivot to this incredible study on how muzzling the press leads directly to government corruption. And it's backed by some serious data.
It's not just a vague idea anymore.
Not at all. Then we have to talk about the arrest of Don Lemon in Minnesota, which is a truly wild story. And finally, why are Colombian soldiers suddenly showing up on the front lines in Ukraine?
And it might sound like a random jumble of topics, but there really is a common thread here.
Which is?
It's the erosion of safeguards. Financial safeguards, legal ones, democratic ones. They're all being tested at once.
All right, let's start with the money, because I think a lot of people listening might be thinking, hey, if my 401k is up, who cares if the dollar is down? Doesn't a weak dollar help exports?
In a normal world, yes.
Yeah.
A cheaper dollar makes American cars cheaper in Germany. But this isn't a normal cycle.
Okay.
This is a crisis of confidence. The dollar is dropping because foreign investors are looking at America's balance sheet, and they are, frankly, terrified.
But what are they seeing that's so new? The U.S. has had debt for decades.
They're scared of something the bond traders call fiscal dominance.
Fiscal dominance.
Basically, it's the idea that the U.S. debt is now so high that the Federal Reserve can't raise interest rates to fight inflation.
Why not?
Because if they did, the interest payments on the national debt would bankrupt the Treasury. So the Fed has lost its main weapon.
Wow.
And foreign investors, they know this. They own American assets equal to 89% of the entire U.S. GDP.
89%. That is a staggering number.
It's a huge amount of exposure. So if they smell smoke, if they think the U.S. is just going to print money to pay its bills, they all run for the exit at the same time.
Is that what we saw back in April 2025 at the Liberation Day tariffs?
That was a tremor, a big one. When President Trump announced those tariffs, the market didn't see protectionism. The market saw inflation.
Because tariffs raise prices.
Exactly. Tariffs raise prices. Normally, the Fed would raise rates to fight that. But you've got massive tax cuts plus new tariffs.
Yeah.
That's a huge deficit and inflation.
And if the Fed can't raise rates,
then inflation just runs wild.
Yeah.
And that's why we're seeing what the article calls these spasms of panic.
Right.
These huge sell-offs happening week after week. It's a high frequency of fear.
Which brings us to Kevin Warsh, the new nominee for the Fed. I remember him. He was always the guy on cable news warning about inflation, the need for sound money. He was a hawk.
He was a hawk. But it seems he's had a kind of Damascene conversion. Suddenly he's talking about how AI is going to create this productivity miracle that lets us have low rates forever.
That sounds convenient. A bit like, don't worry about the debt, the robots will pay for it.
It's very politically convenient thinking. He's signaling to the president, I will cut rates for you. And that's what terrifies the bond market.
Because it removes the Fed's independence.
Precisely. If the central bank is just an arm of the White House, then the dollar isn't a safe haven. It's just a political tool. And that, right there, explains the gold price.
It's an insurance policy.
It's an insurance policy against your own government debasing the currency. It is a very, very expensive vote of no confidence.
Okay, so the financial safeguard is cracking. Let's move to the next one. The truth. Or, the ability to report it.
No.
The Economist has this analysis on the link between a free press and corruption. And usually we talk about this in these sort of vague, idealistic terms, democracy dies in darkness.
Right? It's abstract. But this report grounds it in cold, hard data. They analyzed 80 years of data from the VDEM project, and the correlation is it's undeniable. When you silence the media, corruption explodes.
But there's a catch.
There is, and this is the most important part. It doesn't happen right away. There's a lag.
A 4-year lag? Why 4 years?
Well, think of it like a bridge. If you fire the safety inspector today, the bridge doesn't fall down tomorrow.
Right, it looks fine.
It looks fine. But then the maintenance contracts start going to the mayor's cousin. They use cheaper concrete. The reports get faked. It takes about 4 years of that graft and neglect before the cracks actually start to show.
And by the time the bridge is crumbling, the politicians who cash the checks are long gone.
That's the corruption loop. The voters don't realize they've been robbed until it's too late. And what's so scary now is how governments are starting that loop. It's not just throwing journalists in jail anymore.
No, it's what the article calls the grifter's gag.
It's a great phrase. It means using the legal system itself as a weapon. Lawfare. Look at India. The investigative outlet News Laundry. They haven't been shut down by force. They're just being buried under 80 different tax notices in 4 years.
80. That is not an audit. That is pure harassment.
It's designed to bankrupt them with legal fees. Or look at the U.S., where the president is suing the New York Times, the BBC, and CNN for billions. The goal isn't even to win.
It's to make reporting so expensive that you just stop. You self-censor.
It's a chilling effect, and that silence is where the corruption starts to grow.
Speaking of chilling effects,
Yeah.
we have to talk about what happened in St. Paul, Minnesota, because this brings that lawfare idea down to the street level. I'm talking about the arrest of Don Lemon.
This story is just surreal. So it's January 18th. Don Lemon, the former news anchor, is live streaming outside a church.
And why is he there? Because the pastor of that church is also the acting field director for ICE.
Which is a whole other conversation.
Right. So there's a protest. Lemon is there asking questions, and the police arrest him. And the charge, I had to look this up because I didn't believe it. It wasn't trespassing. It wasn't assault.
He was charged with peppering him with questions.
Peppering him with questions. Is that even in the penal code? When did asking questions become a crime?
Legally, it's not. But the prosecutor's argument was that it was an attempt to oppress and intimidate a public official.
Wow.
And this isn't just one rogue prosecutor. This is part of a much bigger federal crackdown on dissent happening in Minnesota.
And the U.S. Attorney's Office there is just, it's falling apart.
It's imploding. It went from 60 lawyers down to fewer than 20. They're resigning in protest.
Why? What are they saying?
They're saying they're being ordered by Washington to chase protesters and political opponents instead of, actual criminals, terrorists, fraudsters, drug traffickers.
There's that quote from one prosecutor who just said, "The system sucks. This job sucks."
It's a cry for help, but you have to ask, why is this happening?
Yeah.
Is it just chaos, or is there some kind of blueprint? And that's where we have to talk about the Claremontsters.
The Claremont Institute.
Yes, a think tank out in California. For a long time, they were seen as outliers. But now their alumni are in the highest levels of this administration, the Office of Management and Budget, the CIA deputy director.
So they're the intellectual architects. What's their philosophy?
They believe the entire American administrative state, the civil service, the DOJ, the EPA, all of it, is illegitimate, a kind of tyranny.
So they don't want to run the government. They want to dismantle it.
They literally use the phrase counter-revolution. They talk about needing a Red Caesar to come in and smash the bureaucracy. So when you see a prosecutor charging someone for asking questions, it's not an accident.
It's a feature, not a bug.
It's the application of their philosophy. They see things like an independent DOJ or a free press as obstacles to what they consider true liberty.
Which is such a strange and perfect segue to our next topic.
Yeah.
Because while the government is tightening its grip on speech, it's also loosening its grip on something incredibly profound: death.
It's this libertarian paradox of 2026, isn't it? Political liberty is shrinking, but this very personal social liberty around the end of life is expanding so quickly.
We're talking about right-to-die laws.
Yes. By the end of this year, it's projected that 30% of Americans will live in a state where assisted dying is legal.
A third of the country. That's a massive shift happening almost. Silently.
It really is. It used to just be a couple of states, like Oregon. Now you've got Illinois, Delaware, and New York is on the verge.
Governor Hochul is about to sign it, and for her, this is deeply personal.
It is. Her mother, Patricia Ann Courtney, died of ALS.
Mm.
And if you've ever known anyone with ALS, you understand. It's an unbelievably cruel disease. Governor Hochul saw that suffering up close, and it changed her mind.
Is there a worry, though, about the slippery slope? I mean, you look at Canada, where the laws have become much broader, including things like mental illness.
That's the central debate. But the U.S. laws are actually being written with much, much tighter safeguards. In New York's law, for example, you have to have a terminal diagnosis of 6 months or less to live. 2 doctors have to confirm it. And they've added a requirement for a psychiatrist to sign off to make sure it's not coercion or untreated depression.
So it's very strictly for the terminally ill.
For now, yes. But what's fascinating is the polling. Over half of Americans now say assisted dying is morally acceptable. In a country that can't agree on anything, a consensus is forming around this one issue: control over your own exit.
It really is that split-screen feeling again. The state is saying, we're going to control what you say to a federal agent, but we'll step back and let you decide when to die.
It's a redefinition of freedom, in a way. Freedom from suffering is being prioritized over freedom of speech.
Okay, we have one last stop, and this one takes us outside the U.S., but in a weird way brings us right back to the global economy. I was scrolling TikTok the other day, and I see this video from a trench in Ukraine. But the soldiers aren't speaking Ukrainian. They're speaking Spanish with very clearly Colombian accents.
You're not imagining things. It's a huge phenomenon. There are an estimated 3,000 Colombian soldiers fighting for Ukraine right now.
3,000? That's a whole brigade. Why Colombia?
It's simple supply and demand. Colombia's had this long internal conflict, so they have a massive battle-hardened army. And critically, they're NATO-trained. They know how to use the equipment.
They're plug-and-play soldiers.
Exactly. But here's the kicker. In Colombia, soldiers are forced to retire at age 45.
45. You're still in your prime.
You are. But you're pushed out with a pension of around $400 a month. You can't raise a family on that.
But a private contractor in Ukraine will pay you.
10 times that. Maybe more. So they pack their bags and go. It's economic migration with an assault rifle.
The irony is just, it's incredible. You have Colombia's President Gustavo Petro, a leftist, a former guerrilla, preaching total peace. And at the same time, his country's single biggest export is becoming trained mercenaries.
It's a diplomatic nightmare for him. He's trying so hard to play nice with the U.S. He just visited the White House. Trump said the meeting was terrific. Petro literally walked out holding a Mitra hat.
You're kidding! The former revolutionary with a Mitra hat.
The photos are out there.
Yeah.
He's trying to stabilize his country's economy. But at the same time, the failure of that economy is what's driving his best-trained citizens into global conflicts. It just shows no matter what the politicians say, economic reality always wins.
So we've covered a lot. A dollar that's cracking, a press being silenced to fuel this corruption loop, an ideology from the Claremont Institute that's actively dismantling legal norms, and now Colombian soldiers for hire.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
But if you take a step back, the big picture becomes pretty clear. We're living through a massive stress test.
A stress test of what?
Of the entire infrastructure of the post-war liberal order.
Right.
All these systems we built, independent central banks, a free press, neutral courts, they were designed to provide stability.
The safeguards.
The safeguards. To prevent the whims of one person or one party from breaking the whole system. And what we're seeing in February 2026 is that those safeguards are being deliberately removed, one by one.
And without them, we're left with what?
Volatility, uncertainty, a world where gold is $5,000 because who knows what the dollar will be worth next year, a world where you don't know if what you're reading is the truth.
I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. It was in the letters section of The Economist, a response to an article about AI, but it applies to everything we've said. The writer argued that the human brain is the scarcest economic infrastructure.
That's profound. We're so focused on computer chips and power grids, but critical thinking is the real bottleneck.
Exactly. AI can generate text, it can write code, but it can't generate courage. It can't speak truth to power. Only a human brain can do that. And if we build a system, through lawsuits or arrests or censorship, that stops those brains from asking questions,
then we are shutting down our most valuable piece of infrastructure right when we need it most.
That's the thought for the week. Thanks for taking the plunge with us on the deep dive. Keep asking questions, especially if someone tells you not to. We'll see you next time.